Alex, it's not Friday.
No, it's not. It's a Tuesday. What the hell are we doing here?
Well, I was doing a couple. I woke up, let's call it leisurely this
hmm
morning. A couple minutes later than I usually get out of bed. One of the benefits of working from home, I can be on my phone looking at RSS feeds and answering emails, and I'm getting stuff done.
hmm
Things are happening.
Yeah.
It's not like I took out the garbage. I walked my dog. I gave my dog some medicine. I was just like, I'll work a little later today, and I'll get started, a little bit later too. I sit
hmm
down at my computer like 10:15, and just Twitter is just going. A lot of Xbox news happened this morning.
Yeah. They kind of threw it all out there at once. We have learned today that the Kinect will soon no longer be a required bundle item for the Xbox One. As of June, there will be a $399 version of the Xbox One that comes with no Kinect. And eventually, Microsoft will be selling the Kinect sort of a la carte, though they have not said when exactly that will be. There is other news regarding the Xbox that also came out, but I feel like that's kind of the big one right there.
Yeah, the big one is Connect, especially since, let's say, I might have made a brief appearance on the Bombcast yesterday, and at the end, Vinny was like, "Hey, let's talk about E3 really quick," and asked me this specific line of questioning. And then I talked to him this morning, and he goes, I could just. It doesn't have to appear in the podcast. And I was like, no, I need to live with this. I need to live with the
Yeah,
fact that not only was my guess incorrect, but immediately upon making it, it was deemed incorrect. Although 50-50, Vinny asked, "Do you think there'll be a connectless Xbox?" I said no, and I'll talk about my reasoning for that in a second. But he also asked if there would be a price drop, and I said yes. So I was wrong, but also right, but not because of the reason I thought I would be right. But yeah,
you were right for the wrong reasons.
exactly. But yeah, they announced that you can buy the connectless Xbox One on Amazon right now. I'm sure other retailers are offering it as well. But it doesn't ship until June 9th, which strikes me that upfront as kind of a curious decision. It makes it sound like as soon as they were comfortable announcing this news, they decided to announce this news rather than waiting to do a lot of companies have started following Apple's model. Consoles don't necessarily work this way, but a lot of times when there are updates or refreshes or changes made, you make the announcement and then here's the link to Amazon. Go buy it. Also, it'll show up tomorrow.
Yeah.
As opposed to this, where you have to wait a couple of weeks. This change will not really be reflected in NPD data for May. So I get the impression from this that they went, hey, we let's just announce this. Let's get it out of the way. Let's have this conversation in the middle of May before E3 has come to pass and move on from there.
Yeah, you get the impression they didn't want this to be the story of E3 for them. This is the story that they just, they finally caved on the Kinect. It's and admitted that its necessity to the product was at this point tangential at best. I imagine in their heads they want E3 to be about all the exciting games and things they're going to announce at the show. So better to get this out of the way as quick as possible so that people will burn out on it before the show actually starts. Whether that will actually happen or not, I don't know. But them making a move like this certainly is a bold thing to do. This far ahead of the show. It puts them into a position now where they can directly compete with the price point of the PlayStation 4. It does sort of negate a lot of the. I mean, to be fair, when they started out with the Xbox One, they were talking about all of that DRM stuff and how integral it was to the design. Then they were able to go, you know what? No, we're not doing that anymore. Maybe we should have taken their whole the Kinect is integral to the experience line as maybe a little bit of bullshit as well.
But okay, so think about the ripples of this decision in terms of they backtracked on the DRM, which
hmm
from every understanding I have, they invested significant development resources into getting those policies into place, into modifying their infrastructure, rushed to get that ready and changed in time for launch because of the response from consumers and the constant knifing from a Sony in that regard.
Yeah.
They are turning the Kinect into an accessory when it was up until just a couple of months ago. The lines they were putting out were that this is integral, this is part of the philosophy of the platform, if these decisions had been made 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
the Xbox platform would have been a very different machine than the one that shipped last November. They
Yes.
probably would have made the machine slightly more powerful, and thus we wouldn't have these constant conversations about 1080p and 60 frames a second that comes up with about every game that's been coming out for both platforms. That conversation will probably continue. We'll probably get closer in parity, but there will always be a power difference that matters that probably they could have corrected for if they weren't accounting for this extra device that was going to be a huge, significant cost sink onto the device. And they no longer have that as a requirement. There has to be some people going, hurrah, but also, god damn it, it's too late. It's not like they're going to put out another Xbox One with a slightly better GPU and CPU and all that stuff.
Yeah, certainly not anytime soon. Anyway, yeah, it shows what a absolutely astonishing lack of foresight Microsoft had in terms of what this console generation was actually going to be. They obviously had a vision of what they thought next-gen consoles were going to be all about. You know, the DRM stuff. You know, the heavy integration of Kinect, voice commands. You know, all the stuff that they put into that device. They have rolled back so much of it now. It's almost unrecognizable compared to the device that they initially announced. You know, however long, a year ago or whatever. Like it's kind of insane to look at what the Xbox One will be in as of June versus where it was a year ago. It just makes me think that a lot of the people who were involved in the initial design and just sort of putting together what the specs and what the goals for that system were had no idea what the fuck they were actually doing.
Yeah, and it's hard to know how much of this is Phil Spencer coming in and taking, like just
taking
throwing,
the reins.
Yeah, just throwing punches. How much of this was, part of a reaction to the PlayStation 4 consistently outselling the Xbox One since launch, despite even, the launch of Titanfall and all the buzz around that game. But you can't ignore Phil Spencer came in, a guy that is well liked, plays games, has been at Microsoft for a long time, back when they were the underdog and were just getting their start. He comes in, takes over the Xbox division. It's sort of unified under a restructuring at Microsoft. And then all of a sudden, we start seeing a refocusing of the platform. I think I got a question on my Tumblr feed that was like, God, Microsoft made yet another change. They can't seem to stick to a vision. I would say that they really didn't have a very clear vision that was communicated to consumers. They seemed to have a vision that they wanted to communicate, but no one wanted that vision. And now they're course correcting in the direction of the vision that seems to be making some sense for Sony, which is just, you can have all this other stuff, but make sure you've got the games covered up front and make sure that the people who buy and play games are excited and psyched for your system. Make sure you do that first and worry about the other stuff later, whereas Microsoft made the bet that those people will come along and let's focus on all the other stuff up front. And that seems to have terribly backfired to them. Even as someone that I have my cable box connected to my Xbox One, I use the Kinect on a regular basis, and I made that Kinect video last week, which I absolutely credit with them, making all these substantial changes on the Xbox One platform. But clearly that hasn't resonated in either the mainstream to make up for the lack of hardcore players being interested, and hardcore players have kind of rejected it.
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. I remember when the Xbox One launched, and after all the DRM rollback stuff and everything, and actually even before the DRM rollback, when people were just looking at the Xbox One and going, "This just seems like a lot of bad ideas." There were a lot of comparisons people were making, like to the PlayStation 3. Is this going to be their PS3? They're sort of like, top heavy, hard to market, sort of stubbornly, designed system that, doesn't really get the traction that the company is really expecting. I think that in some respects those comparisons were warranted, though the thing I'll give Microsoft at this point is that they have been course correcting at a pace that Sony never did with that system. They have been actively going after every, aspect of that system that people don't like and finding ways to make it a way, at least in some way, better than it was before. Whether you were behind the DRM system they originally had before or not, it's probably safe to say that it still probably would have been implemented pretty problematically. Them getting rid of that and them looking at the price point, the usefulness of Kinect, the fact that there really are no fucking Kinect games at this point. There are like 3 since that system launched that have used Kinect in any meaningful way. That thing was just a noose around their neck at this point. It was just costing that. It was just making people have to pay more for a system that just doesn't have nearly the amount of buzz around it that the PlayStation 4 does right now. Them losing that noose less than a year after the console comes out, that's a pretty crazy course correction, but I think a smart one. I mean, I think that what they're doing is really the only move you can make if you want to achieve parity with the PS4 at this point.
Yeah, and it makes sense they would announce it this quickly because then at E3 they'll mention it, they'll remind everyone, hey, this is news we announced a month ago, but then they can immediately pivot to games. And at least that's what you would expect that they would probably do as a result of announcing news like this in the weeks leading up to E3. But part of the reason that I told Vinny when we were recording my bit on the podcast that I didn't think they would drop the Kinect was because it's so integral to the identity of how they have pitched this device. So it's not that I'm really all that surprised that they would look at the market and say the market demands that we need to get rid of this, or at least in order to get the price down, the first thing they can drop is the Kinect and get there pretty quickly. But that they had just pitched this entire machine largely based on like this sort of unified experience that was tied together by the Kinect. So I thought they would go in the direction of trying to cost cut in ways of keeping the Kinect because it was so tied to their vision, and that they weren't going to invest years of R&D, all of this time talking up the Kinect, and then immediately just sort of drop it. And I don't think they're going to not support the Kinect going forward, but it's going to become accessory status. It's going to get a couple of minutes in the press conference, but my guess is game support goes significantly down, and it largely becomes a UI thing. And I guess the fact that I'm wrong, I'm really not too unhappy about, because I do think it shows a versatility in acknowledging what the consumers want in a way that, you're right, they're doing it in the first year. It took years for Sony to get out of their hole.
Yeah.
Not to say that Microsoft's going to make these changes and then suddenly, it's possible Sony could just keep running away with it and could keep increasing the gap they have between themselves and Microsoft. But Sony was a stubborn ass company when the PlayStation 3 launched. I think it's very easy to forget in the PS4 era, but doesn't guarantee success for Microsoft. But I think it sure bodes well in the Phil Spencer era that they're going to get to a place where they feel more comfortable with the device they're talking about and the way they talk about it to players much more quickly.
That said, as much as this is, they still consider the Kinect part of their vision, and as much as it's being, supposedly relegated to accessory status, that's kind of where it was already. It was just an accessory that you had to buy. You didn't have a choice in the matter. It's not like the Kinect has, you put out that video last week. You've talked about some of the problems it has. Obviously, there are ideas within the Kinect system that aren't terrible. The idea of being able to use voice chat to navigate that system, to do some of the things that it allows you to do, is great. It just has never worked consistently, and even with this upgraded tech for this system, the Kinect is still, at best, a partially functional device that does not do everything it is supposed to do in a reliable fashion. There have been almost no games for the Kinect that really have stood out at all. Like that new Kinect Sports game was like the first one this year, I think.
And they barely pushed that game. It kind of felt like it just came and went, and the little I even read about it was that, holy crap, this stuff doesn't work. And that's so, if there's a lesson to take away from that Kinect video that I made, I think the voice stuff remains promising. I don't know the hardware breakdown of the new Kinect, but it wouldn't shock me if the camera technology is a significant cost in building that device. And I wouldn't be opposed if, I don't know how technologically feasible this is, but if they put out just an audio Kinect, one that was like much cheaper but allowed you to interact with the voice commands, I think that could be interesting. I also didn't realize that, so like the new Amazon Fire TV which is sort of the little set-top box they announced
Mhm.
about a month or so ago. So that has voice control as well. And one of the biggest problems with Kinect is the fact that it sits on top of your TV and has to try and hear you through the sound that's coming out of your television, whether you're watching a TV
Right.
show or a movie or playing a game. Oftentimes, to get the best success, I have my remote control for my speaker. I'll mute it and then talk to the Kinect, which is a step that is somewhat unnecessary, but I also don't want to have to speak louder. I like being able to speak at a normal voice instead of yelling at my TV. And the Fire TV allows you to talk to the remote. So you have the remote right next to you. You talk to the remote. That gets over the distance you have from the device in order to communicate what you're saying. It's the reason that Siri and Google Now and other devices work really well. I wonder if there's some way that, whether it's remote or if I could talk to my phone, like they could do some sort of voice thing with the Kinect, because I think that remains the most promising part about it. It seems like the camera stuff, outside of Dance Central or Fantasia, it's really hard to see where that stuff is going. But I don't know. I feel bad for those guys.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, that was sort of where I was leading to that point, is that the only people who are really screwed at this point by this are the people who were developing games for Kinect at this point. And beyond Harmonix making Fantasia, and I'm just going to throw out a guess and say probably another Dance Central at some point, there really is. I can't think of anyone that's actually working on Kinect technology stuff, and I'm wondering if maybe that really was it. Like maybe Microsoft had some people internally working on some stuff, and maybe they just looked at it and went, there's just not enough to justify us continuing to foist this on people, as a requirement. Like there's just not enough there to justify continuing to be the more expensive console, for the foreseeable future. They're probably right if that's the case. There is really no justification. Like, as much as I like Fantasia and I've played it, I played it last week. It's still fun. That's not enough to justify continuing to sell that hardware as a gaming device. Like that's not enough to justify its existence in that bundle. So it really fucking sucks if you're working on Kinect games right now. But how many of those really were there in development?
Yeah, I'm going to be very curious how that stuff moves going forward. Someone also asked me.
Swery was also making that game.
Oh, I think people are saying D4 has a controller option too.
Yeah,
so
but I remember they showed it. They showed it with Kinect stuff at E3 last year.
Yeah, so it's in terms of Microsoft and its support for Kinect going forward. I think. Whether this is actually a huge monumental resources shift is not something we're going to know up front, because they're going to announce Kinect games at E3. My guess is they maybe talk a little bit more about their support for Kinect than they might have otherwise done so on stage at E3, because they'll want to just show like, hey, we're still supporting this, we're still doing stuff for this, even if they're dropping it from the bundle status. But I think the next 18 months is kind of where we figure out what exactly Microsoft has plans for this device. Do they drop it in, not necessarily entirely, but is it purely relegated to accessory status? Do they fund any other games beyond the ones that they're interested in now? Like, do they have any partners? Do the partners that they do have start dropping out interest in supporting this device? That stuff becomes clear, I think, in the next 18 months as opposed to the next couple of months. But I think 2015 will say quite a lot about the Kinect, and I guess I wouldn't be surprised if it really was just a way that I told my Xbox to turn off and go to TV moving forward. But yeah, it's crazy. I am genuinely shocked that they announced this, because they had just been so insistent that it was a requirement for them to build this box in the first place.
Yeah, it makes you, I mean, not that you shouldn't have been questioning this kind of stuff, otherwise, but it definitely makes you realize that when a company tells you, no, this is really important, this is really vital to the system, we believe that this has to be there, there's a good chance that they are just full of shit. In truth, there are very few developmental problems that probably can't be worked around in such a way, so long as it is financially beneficial to the company. In this case, as much as they say that Kinect was vital to the Xbox One experience, it sure as hell seems a hell of a lot less vital right now. The Kinect was not the only stuff that they announced
Right.
in regards to Xbox One stuff. Non-gaming apps like media apps are officially going to be accessible outside of the Xbox Gold package.
Finally,
Yeah.
finally, like the most obvious move from 5 years ago has finally
Yeah.
been made by this company.
Yeah, and that's a smart move. They should have done a long time ago. It puts them in line with everyone else. It makes sense. And it sounds like they've made some changes to like the Xbox free game stuff. Though I'm scanning the story I'm reading right now and I can't find it. What was the change there?
For the games with gold, is that what you said?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're beefing up the games that they're offering. They're gonna have Dark Souls and what are the other games? I'm loading up our story now. Dark Souls, Charlie Murder, and Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition on 360, and Max: The Curse of Brotherhood and Halo: Spartan Assault on Xbox One. They're also going to be doing significant, deep price cuts on games like Rise: Son of Rome and Forza Motorsport 5, starting next month. It sounds like a lot of this is going to be, E3 time to get people excited to turn on their machine and learning about the new games, and then also buying stuff. So those are changes coming. And the significant change to games with gold is that it is now subscription based.
That's what it was. Okay.
PlayStation Plus requires that the games that come along, that are free, you're paying for PlayStation Plus, so they're not really free. But the games that are sort of bundled each month with PlayStation Plus, you have to keep paying for PlayStation Plus, or else you lose access to those games. Previously, Microsoft tried to differentiate themselves by saying, hey, if you stop paying for Xbox Live Gold, you still get those games. But they also had their games weren't nearly as good. They were not offering the same library as Sony was, and now they seem to be trying to step up their game in terms of the games they are offering, but they also now are saying, hey, you need to have Xbox Live Gold to make this work. This seems part of the horse trade of, hey, we give up Netflix and Hulu and things like that, but if you want to play these free games, then you need to be part of Gold. And you know what? I think that's a completely fair trade. I think it makes a lot more sense that is the kind of reason that you would have a subscription service, is to get access to games like this at, essentially deeply subsidized prices by Microsoft. While it obviously takes away something that they were offering before, in terms of what you want from a service you're paying for, I think it's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, it puts them in line. The main thing about all these moves is that it puts them in much more direct line with what Sony is offering on the PlayStation 4. It's kind of amazing, actually, how much this actually is just them completely course-correcting in nearly exactly the same direction that Sony was going. But it makes sense because they're falling behind in sales a little bit. I mean, it's not like the Xbox One isn't selling at all. It seems to be doing reasonably well, but they're behind right now, and that's not a position that Microsoft has been in really very much for a while. Like, they're used to being, if not always the top seller, then pretty regularly the top seller. These aren't on paper, these sort of look like panic moves, but in realistically looking at them, they're smart moves. They're smart moves that make that system look more appealing in the grand scheme of things. So I don't know. It's a really crazy day for Microsoft in general, but I feel like by and large, I think most of these changes are really good. I think that they're doing what they need to do to compete. Now I'm sitting here, I keep staring at the Kinect camera in my living room and going, should I just put this in a box? Should I just get rid of this? What am I even going to do with this now at this point?
Yeah, I'm going to keep mine connected, especially because I have mine, connected to the cable box, and it's I do like flipping around. Jeff was talking about this on Twitter today, because the UI is currently so integrated with Kinect. It's not that great to navigate with a controller. It is a lot easier to navigate with the Kinect. I mean, it is kind of cool that I go Xbox on, Xbox go to Super Time Force, and then boom, I'm in Super Time Force, because it's also, it didn't completely turn off, and now the game just boots right in. Like, that stuff is convenient, especially when, it works on command. But, I wonder if we'll see some significant UI overhaul at E3, because obviously we're going to be seeing the first glimpses of, changes they're making for like the annual year one patch that I imagine is still going to happen, despite the fact that they've done incremental updates. But I have to imagine if you're selling a connectless Xbox One, you are also going to start modifying the interface to better integrate with a controller, because right now it's a pretty poor experience.
It's a mess. It's a fucking mess.
All right, I'm looking through some questions before we get out here. See what we can. 617 JBug makes an interesting point. Do you think Microsoft will open up the GPU the Kinect needed for game development? It's an interesting question. I don't know. That's probably too early to say whether they would free up the resources dedicated to Kinect. But it'd be hard to imagine they would do so because they've sold millions of devices with Kinects. So
exactly.
That kind of puts them in a tough spot.
I think they still theoretically want people to have Kinects. I think this is their testing ground to see whether people will, flock to that system without the Kinect or not. And if people do, then yeah, maybe they think about that. But for right now, they still have to sort of cater to the few million people who already bought one of those systems with the camera.
Xader says, will Sony react to this, or is their position still comfortable enough? He thinks that they'll do nothing. Do you think Sony acknowledges anything like this? Do you think they decide to get cute? Or will they, actually make substantive, like consider a price cut just to sort of stab them a little bit?
I mean, I think if they really did want to get cute with it, a $50 price cut and some kind of actually good holiday bundle would be probably enough to do it. I don't think they necessarily will. I don't think they need to be cheaper than the Xbox One right now. I think being at the same price point doesn't really hurt them that much. But we'll see. I think I don't know. It's going to depend on how perceptions come out of E3. What people think of Sony's lineup, what they think of what they have coming down the pipes. But right now, they can just kind of sit back, look at this move, and go, all right, well, obviously we were on the right path before, so no reason to screw with this now.
Yeah, I was getting pretty tired of Sony's jabs by the time launch was coming around. Anyway, I think they have proven that they made some smart decisions in getting the PS4 into people's good graces and giving them something they were looking forward to with the launch of a new piece of hardware. The sales are proving that out. I would not be surprised if not only did they not get cute about it, but they didn't really make any substantive changes. I don't think they would even. It doesn't even make sense to consider a price cut until it is shown that this is having a huge impact. It's
right.
It's entirely possible that the brand damage that Microsoft has done means that while $100 can move the needle, it may not move it enough where Sony feels like, hey, price cuts are treasured moments in the life of a console. You don't just throw those out willy-nilly. Those are used to try and spike interest, and it doesn't seem like they really need to do that right now.
Yeah, if they're gonna do it, they really don't need to do it until at least the holidays, because they need to, like you said, wait and see how this actually moves for Microsoft, if this actually moves them into a more competitive position or not. Right now, there's no reason to think that.
Lokno mentioned sort of an ancillary question to all this. Will Nintendo drop the gamepad?
No, I don't think they will. Because I think that, as crappy as the gamepad can be in certain respects, I think I don't know. I actually don't mind the gamepad at all, and I don't feel like that's like a huge hindrance to that system, to its sales. It's not like the system is overly expensive because of the gamepad. If I don't feel like excising that from that package really does anything to them one way or the other. It's not like people are specifically avoiding buying the Wii U because the gamepad is there and they don't want that. I haven't heard that conversation very much, and I don't think that's really the crux of the problem for that system. So I think that would be a weird move if they did that, especially considering they haven't even made it so you can have two of those things yet, right?
No, and they always said up until when the machine was announced that they didn't really have plans to support multiple gamepads. They said it was possible, but that the gamepads themselves were so cost prohibitive that would be kind of crazy to expect people to have several of those. And I think Nintendo already telegraphed what they plan to do in terms of dropping support for a gamepad, which is that no, they're going to announce a figurine program, which it seems to be like their next Hail Mary to try and turn the tide on the Wii U. And with an NFC chip inside every gamepad, that seems like, what are they going to do? Say no, sell a Wii U without a gamepad, but go buy an accessory that has an NFC detector? I mean, that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense for me. All Satoru Iwata has said is that they intend to make the gamepad a more compelling device because they consider it to be a differentiator for their platform. So, whether he is right or wrong about that, it does seem like Nintendo is going. They are less prone to making sweeping changes like this at the whims of the market or what people are asking for. Oftentimes that comes to bite them in the ass. Sometimes it pays off for them in ways that people do not expect. But I really don't think that they're suddenly just going to say, like, when gamepad is, going away, $100 price cut. Plus, I don't think that would make that significant of a difference. I think the situation is far different for the Wii U than it is for the Xbox One.
Yeah, it's been the cheapest console for a long time. I mean, it's the cheapest of the newest consoles and has been for a while, and that isn't necessarily helping its sales figures at all. So there you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've covered kind of everything that's happened. This is a big morning.
Hell of a day. Hell of a day.
A lot going on. So if the industry just wants to calm down for a little bit, that'd be real nice of them.
Like, we're over here trying to book E3 shows and shit. Like, we ain't got time to be reporting on, like, all this news and stuff.
Stop it, video games.
Yeah.
But this is fun. We did this last time when Irrational Games shut down. It's, the ease of just launching a video and chat with folks is pretty cool. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And also, people had asked for this last time, but we didn't have the foresight to actually get it done. We have recorded the audio for this in the same way that we record the audio for Bomb in the AM. So a little bit after this is over, I will put together a podcast version that will show up in the Bomb in the AM feed. If you had trouble with the podcast feeds yesterday, those should work themselves out today. That was a result of our site being down, in addition to GameSpot being down, and even CBS.com was down yesterday. So
yeah,
shit got real in terms of websites disappearing for like an 8-hour span. I'm sure nobody was stressed about that yesterday.
No, not at all. No, there's no way people were freaking the fuck out about that.
No, but we'll see. We're in the lead up to E3. We'll see if anything else pops up in between now and then that necessitates us doing something like this again. But we try and keep this to be the biggest of news if we're gonna spend some extra time in between shows talking about it. But Alex, I will talk to you later this week.
Yeah, later, man.
Ugh.